Welcome to Fireside Chats with Mats. So actually this one, I think it might be interesting. So I mentioned Rob Ager a few episodes back, maybe. I was watching a Rob Ager thing about Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson debating with Kathy Newman on that interview about like the patriarchy and whatever. And he talked about using words where, I think it was that, if it wasn't a different Rob Ager video, but he talked about using words where there's an underlying subconscious response to a secondary meaning of a word, even if you're not using the word in that context, but rather a context where the word means something else. So when I say like, dear so-and-so, I am now writing you a letter. With the word dear is D-E-A-R. It's like the word that you use at the beginning of a letter. Like I suppose it might, I'm actually not totally sure what it signifies at the beginning of a letter, but I think it might be signifying like, the phrase like, oh, she's my dear sweetheart, or you're my dear, you are my dear Timothy, or you're my dear Madeline, or something, like my dears, like my little dearies, So, dear Madeline, oh, dear Madeline. But when you say the word dear, Rob Ager was saying something like, well, when the word dear is said, you're also, on some level, recognizing it as the word for the animal in the forest, deer. And so yeah, it's really and the thing is, he really showed its validity in giving you an example of people telling jokes, and jokes often working because you're using wordplay, you're using double entendres where the word means two things at once, and it happens so automatically that, like, often with a punchline that has wordplay in it, you'll laugh like sort of as an automatic response. So that sort of proves that multiple layers of a given word are hitting you at the same time, even if were it not to be in a joking situation and were there not to be a setup where it was a pun, you might not have thought of that other use of the word other than the one that it would have normally been used as in the sentence. So another good place to look at this stuff is with like rap music. Like I was just thinking of the word dear with Tom McDonald. He says something in some song like, you used to be my dear friend, and these days I'd still shoot a deer, or something, and like, or something like that. I might be messing it up. I'm certainly messing it up a little bit, I think, but essentially, like, rap lyrics in themselves and like poetry and all sorts of stuff does that kind of like double entendre stuff all the time. And often when somebody uses the phrase double entendre, or they use the term double entendre, they're often referring to something like sexual or something, and that I would point to as well. But nevertheless, double entendre is just for any word with like double meaning, really. And but here's the thing: sexualization of a language. That's one thing I would point to. So it's like what kinds of words seem to be weaponized in our culture. One, I would say, is consumer. Of course, I've talked about it elsewhere. If you want me to point you to some places where I talk about the word consume and consumer and stuff, let me know in a comment, and I can, on the YouTube channel, Fireside Chats with Mats, and I can give you some links or something maybe, or point you in the right direction. But consumer's a really bad one. I think that might be one of the most toxic ones. The term toxic in itself is probably bad because it's such an extreme term to use for almost anything that it might be used for, including the way I just used it for there. Well, maybe not, because the way these terms like consume go through our society, it really is like a dangerous situation in terms of the mind control involved, and the ways that people are affected by using like the term consume over and over again about everything. And then it's like, well, how are they going to perceive themselves? Well, they're probably going to perceive themselves as these big consumers who are just consuming the planet. Everywhere they go, they're consuming everything. They're not reading something anymore, they're consuming it. They're not watching a video online anymore, they're consuming it. They're not playing a video game anymore, they're consuming it. Like literally, it seems like all verbs have been replaced by the term consume. And in one of the things that I talked about this in, I made a joke. But it's sort of like, eventually we're going to be saying like you're going to go consume the front lawn. When you mow the lawn, they're going to replace the term mow with consume. You're going to go consume the lawn. And you might say, well, Matt, no, that's not the same usage, because with these other things, it's consume in the sense that you're taking this in as an experience. So you're sort of like, in a certain sense, you're sort of consuming this work of literature or this music or something. And it's like, no, I get this. And yes, so that's part of the joke with the consuming the front lawn thing, because it is in a different context. But, in the sense that mowing the lawn is an experience, I've got to say, it would not surprise me if somebody like went that far unironically, and not as like some kind of humorous thing, but just as something that felt like it was the proper way for them to say it. It's so proper to use consume as your only verb for everything these days. So yes, I will consume the lawn. Thank you very much. So I see a word used like consume, and I was even annoyed at it like back before it became so ubiquitous. Back when I was like, it must have been maybe around 2000, 2001. It was in health class or something like that in school, and I saw the term consumers being used to describe like people in the context of like a market or something. But it was like they literally, the noun for the people was consumers, and like that really bugged me and it irritated me. It's like, well, it seemed weird because it was like, shouldn't they be called customers? And I've said this before, but yeah, it's like, well, they wouldn't be called customers because customers for a particular store, but as a state of being, it would be a consumer. A customer would only be when they're like in a particular place buying things. But but as an entity, they are a consumer, and it's like, but that's so disrespectful and that's so disgusting, and it really like lumps people in forcibly into this like Marxist paradigm where it's all about the ownership of this and the ownership of that, and you're taking the resources from the rightful people and blah blah blah. And it's like, you're lumping people into that by using the term consumer to describe them, because you are literally replacing a noun for them, or just like a noun as like a person or something. You're like people, you're replacing the word like people, or the word, even the word like customers or something, which at least has a sense of like being something that you're doing but not something that defines you. You're replacing a more neutral thing with a term that is casting this person as like inherently defined by them buying shit. And it's like, and you guys are the ones saying that everyone's like a big capitalist and everyone's so materialistic. It's like, you guys are literally defining people with like literal fucking like price tags above their heads, basically. And so it's just that whole overuse of the term consume, it is so annoying to me. And that's one of the ones where it makes, in a certain sense, like I have a physical reaction. Like my stomach kind of churns. It's like, oh, like I feel squirming, like when somebody says consume in that sense. And sometimes I will like just literally turn off a video, because if somebody's likely to say consume, they're also likely to use a fleet of other words similar to that seem similarly dangerous.